One, live. And we are live for episode 158 of Trek Live. How you doing this morning, Dan?
Doing good. Sorry for the late start. I was having some technical difficulties with my design programs, so I appreciate you guys sticking with us with this late start.
Yes. It happens. The
Yeah.
whole live concept at times.
Yes.
But we are very happy to be here. We're going to be returning to, this is our third time with this no prep idea. For those who maybe have not seen one of these before, we basically use the Memory Alpha random article generator to take us to someplace completely random. Like we just click it, we'll share our screen, Dan's going to share his, click it, and whatever pops up is going to kind of spark our conversation. So it could be an episode, it could be a character, it could be a prop or a set or a ship, and then it doesn't have to be like strictly confined to exactly just that one little thing, but it's a starting point. And I'm just going to talk for an hour about whatever, based on what this what the article generator gives us. We've had a good time with this a couple times in the past. We don't like to overdo it. Maybe a couple times a year we'll do it. So I'm sure we'll return to it at some point later in 2021. But it's a lot of fun, and definitely enjoy it.
Here at Trek,
the random article. Go ahead. Sorry.
Here at Trek Live, we support tangents, and I think this is just this topic idea is really pushing that envelope. So it's always a fun time going to a conversation where I don't even know, because a lot of the times, both Bill and I have kind of a general idea of what we want to talk about, things we want to mention. It's not scripted, but we have kind of a timeline or a layout of kind of where we want to go with the conversation. But this, it's not that. We do not have that. So
no,
a little nervous.
So yeah, it's always a little nerve-wracking. You never quite know what you're going to get. That's definitely. It's nerve-wracking until you get something. And the last couple times we've done it, I think we ended up kind of like relieved, and we got something that was like, okay, all right, we can have an interesting conversation with this. Mm-hmm. This kind of all spawned from we've mentioned on past shows. I think we always at this point mention our Discord server, and we have these Trek After Dark hangouts on occasion, where whoever's there can kind of just hang out with us. We watch episodes, we play trivia, we just kind of casually hang out with each other on the Discord server, on video chat or on audio chat, whatever people are comfortable with doing. And the way we typically will figure out what episode we're going to watch is we'll use that random article generator, and whatever it kind of lands on is our episode of the moment, or we'll do a best of three kind of a situation. But we definitely lean into this conceit for more than one thing. So looking forward to it. Anxious and nervous for sure, but definitely looking forward to what we got going on. So what Cyber Honey is suggesting, try to guess each other's top 5 season finales. That might be on our short list. We might end up doing that at some point. That's something that's I think that's not outside the realm of possibility. Where are you on your rewatch?
Oh, sure. So I watched 2 episodes this week. I watched Little Green Men and Sort of Careless. Both, for my money, two pretty good episodes. Little Green Men is kind of more of a comedy. It's kind of a fun little romp with kind of the Ferengi trio and Odo. Just really funny. Star Trek doesn't do comedy strictly. A comedy episode, but I think this is as close to a comedy episode as we're going to get. There's some fun sci-fi action adventure stuff with it, but also there's some really good laugh out loud moments in it. So Sort of Careless is probably my favorite of the 2, just because I'm a big Klingon guy, and it dives into the backstory of the Klingons and the mythology. So it's just all good stuff for sure.
Yeah, the Sort of Careless is really good catnip for anybody who loves the Klingon history, Klingon culture stuff with core and going back, like all the discussion about Kahless and like I said, just Klingon history and Herc, like it really goes deep.
Yeah.
And it's a good early episode that kind of really does help establish like Worf's place in
Yes.
the dynamic. It establishes his kind of chemistry with Dax. It's like an early attempt to lock down that dynamic. It's a fun episode for sure. And Little Green Men, I think, like you said, the list of episodes that like really commit to the comedy genre is very long. There are a few across the shows. Voyager's got a couple, TOS has a couple that I think really lean into the comedy. And Little Green Men is definitely one that does as well. I think it's a straight up, comedy, and I think it's one of the better ones too. I think it's really funny. With a lot of good Ferengi humor for sure. Some of the best I think use of the Ferengi kind of humor. I think sometimes that kind of falls flat for me in some of the other episodes that
earlier
are
episodes.
very Ferengi heavy. Yeah. So two good ones. You're right in the thick and thin of good stuff with DS9 season 4 coming up on the halfway point.
Yeah, real quick on just back to the Sword of Kahless. There's one thing that does bug me about that episode is I feel like Cisco and pretty much all of the Alpha Quadrant is a little bit hesitant to go through the wormhole, just because I feel like sometimes they depict that the Dominion is right around the corner. They're just waiting and lurking for them to come through. But this one, it's just like, no, just take the rear grand, no problem, just go for it. So,
yeah,
a minor nitpick.
There is some inconsistency.
Yeah,
no, there's definitely some inconsistency. I think at times with how the going back and forth through the wormhole is handled. I'm curious as I'm getting through my rewatch. I'm still in season 2. The Dominion hasn't totally been uncovered yet. I'll get into exactly where I am in a second, but as you get into like season 3, season 4, there's a lot more hesitation at times to really do anything on the other side of the wormhole because you don't quite know what's hanging around the corner and what's waiting on the other side. So I do think there's at least an impression for portions of the show where that's really pulled back and you really don't want to just necessarily, go willy-nilly. But at times they will when they need to. So it's definitely, now that you mentioned, it's something I'm going to kind of watch for as I do my own watch through that season 3, season 4 point before the war. But when the Dominion is obviously there, they know they're there, and there's a conflict. Yeah.
Speaking of that, how is your rewatch going?
It's going. I watched Blood Oath last night, so that's the last thing I watched, and I love that. I think that's really great early episode of Deep Space Nine. Kind of goes hand in hand with sort of Kahless with Core, a lot of that Klingon stuff. I think it's a real turning point for Dax. I think it's a real pivot point for Jedzia's character, really kind of embracing that slightly more roguish, more carefree. I think in the early days of Deep Space Nine, Dax was almost like at times almost like Vulcan-esque with her very stoic. Yeah, we've talked about this before. The sort of growth of Dax, Jedzia Dax specifically, and how I think our headcanon easily can resolve that with Jedzia's getting used to the symbiont. Her personality undergoes changes as she gets comfortable with being joined and such. So that all makes sense. But this is definitely a point where I feel like Jedzia Dax starts to feel like the Jedzia Dax that we get like later on in the meat of the show. Really great stuff with the Klingons. Jimmy 77 coming off this sort of Kahless conversation mentions Blood Oath, and yes, the TOS Klingons and Blood Oath, all three of those actors, or Koloth and Kang, are awesome. Really great. I really love, as much as I love all the Klingon stuff, I love the conversation between Dax and Kira about what killing does to you, and some really dark stuff.
Very dark.
Talking about the Kira's experience in the occupation, and as Dax kind of weighing her decision on what she's going to do, whether to like satisfy this Blood Oath or to back out of it through a technicality. Really great ending. I love when she comes back and has that silent moment with Kira,
so good.
To kind of just put the button on the episode.
Yeah,
really upper echelon Deep Space Nine, I think. Blood Oath. I also watched Masks last week. That's like another notable one, I guess. That's a rompy, kind of silly, over the top. Your mileage may vary. Certainly, I think it's a divisive episode, but certainly a fun time with Brent Spiner being completely insane and some wacky production design and just general over the topness. But I appreciated it more this time than I have in the past. I think I embraced the wacky of it and had a good time with it. I wouldn't say it's a classic, and I wouldn't say it's a objectively great episode, but I think it's a very valid, very understandable, guilty pleasure for people, and in a sometimes pretty dry run at this kind of mid to late point in season 7, where some of the episodes are a little kind of like dry, like I said, and maybe not the most exciting. Masks at least, brings the wacky and gives it some personality and pizzazz. I definitely appreciated that this time around.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of my biggest takeaways from that run is that Mask is memorable because it does some crazy outlandish things, but also in where it is in the seasons with also Deep Space Nine, I think it just stands out because of that overtopness, and I think it makes it a memorable episode. It may not. I agree with you. It's definitely not upper echelon Trek, but I think I like it because of its really outlandish kind of hour.
Yeah, it embraces the crazy.
Yeah.
That's the best way I guess I can put it. Star Trek can have a lot of fun with just being weird sometimes, and embracing its premise of being wacky science fiction at times, and not taking itself too seriously. And I think Masks is a good example of
who wrote this.
The hazards of that.
Who wrote this?
I think it was Joe Menosky.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Joe Menosky. Yeah. And he's Braga gets a lot of credit for, or he has sort of the reputation for being the one that does a lot of the crazy, mind bendy, crazy, wacky stuff. But Menosky does, I feel like, just as much. Sometimes even wackier stuff at times, like Masks. So yeah, rewatch is going well. I'm coming up on the end of TNG, coming up on the end of season 2 of DS9, which means I'm coming up on Voyager pretty soon here. I'll be overlapping DS9 and Voyager, which I'm really looking forward to.
I'm jealous.
Yeah. Good times ahead, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Cyber Honey asks the question real quick, which is better, Masks or Infinite Regress, if you're talking about? That's actually not a bad pairing of episodes with characters losing their minds and dealing with multiple personalities and playing different versions of people. I think, what do you say? What do you think?
I still am Team Masks. I think I do like the premise. I think when you think about it, it is a good. It's an interesting, to me at least, a sci-fi concept. But yeah, I would have to say Masks. I think, but that's a good.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
Good like double feature. If wanted to go that route. I think Masks is more silly. Masks is more. I think Infinite Regress takes itself more seriously, and I think it maybe is a more airtight, like successful episode, just like more straight line. But I think Masks might be more memorable. I guess.
Yeah.
So it just depends on, I guess, your preference and what you're in the mood for, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's get into the topic of the day. Let's find out what our conversation is going to be.
Okay.
We're gonna roll the dice, so to speak. And I'm as eager as anybody to find out what exactly we are going to be talking about. And my fingers are crossed that it's not anything, completely crazy.
Yeah. Bill, you're gonna have to keep an eye on chat because I won't be able to. Yeah.
Yep.
I will not be able to. Oh, wait, hold on. It's showing our chat for a second. Yeah. So this is this is not our topic today. This is just, I think, was the last page that I was looking at. Because we had recently talked about season 3. So this is Memory Alpha. This is something that Bill talked about at the top of the show. We use quite frequently, not just for Trek After Dark, but for research and information. So it's a definitely good resource for you guys out there looking for some fun articles to educate yourself on. Mm-hmm. Without further ado, go to the Explore tab, random page. see where we go. Is it still running?
Okay, I got the Katati, which is I think we got good stuff here. I think we got something we can run with. Katati, they appear in Voyager's Day of Honor, which I think is a really fun, really
perfect,
really strong episode. So let's kind of just start there. I mean, I don't have any opinion really at all on the Katati, because I couldn't tell you what exactly they. I don't think I could pull their appearance out of my head without looking at a picture of somebody. But I am interested in talking about maybe Day of Honor, maybe Tom and B'Elanna, maybe
let's do it.
What that pivot point in the show is. So let's start there and see where we go from there. So I know from what I can remember, Day of Honor is I'm pretty sure you're a fan, right? Is that an episode that you're typically pretty fond of?
I'm a fan of. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, so I feel like that's, if memory serves, I haven't seen it in quite some time because I haven't watched Voyager in a few years, but the obvious A plot there is the Tom B'Elanna stuff, which I'm eager to talk about. The B plot, something that kind of strikes me thinking about it, is we talked a couple weeks ago about the Hippocratic Oath, and that episode featuring Worf kind of like settling into his place on Deep Space Nine and rubbing up against his old role of security and things like that. This is like a few episodes into 7 of 9 coming onto the show, and if I remember correctly, I think there's stuff in this episode with maybe 7 of 9 having some struggles with adapting, continuing to try to just find her place on the ship and settle into her role. So that's just one little parallel. Yeah. She's requesting a duty assignment. I see it on the picture there.
Yeah.
She's trying to find a role, something to do, keep her busy.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing too. An early, very early introduction for 7 of 9 stuff kind of happening, like out of the Borg makeup and her typical, appearance that we're used to. And off we go. That's Katati. Okay.
Yeah, okay. There we go.
Yep.
Cool.
We have in the chat, Don Paris is here. Good afternoon. Good morning for us. Good afternoon for you. And Cyber Honey says she does like the B'Elanna Torres, admits that she has feelings for Don Paris. Dawson, a lot of really good stuff in this episode. Really a turning point for the show. I mean, the Tom and B'Elanna relationship was, I think, really successfully slowly burned up, like into season 3, late season 3. Yeah. I think by this point you can kind of see the writing on the wall that this is something that they could do. But this really changes the course of the show from this point on. I mean, this changes, B'Elanna's arc. It changes Tom's arc. Like everything about those two characters is really kind of fundamentally shifted here in this episode, as 7 of 9 shakes up the show too. So this is really an important point, I think, along the way for Star Trek Voyager.
Because I think there's a lot of change up in the start of season 4. So this feels like, even before that, I think there was, like you said, some writing on the wall. But a lot of change is happening, and it has happened. So and I think, I don't know, we can dive into kind of each of those things, but just to kind of kick off the Tom and B'Elanna thing, I think it's nice to see a slow burn kind of get capitalized on. Right in TNG, there's elements in there of slow burn for sure, but there's a lot more will they, won't they, and not just from a certain character. There's a few different characters go through this kind of arc that we're going through with the Day of Honor as kind of one of a big turning points for both of those characters. But it's nice to see those characters maybe change for the better, and also to be something interesting to be explored, right? A workplace romance where I think both have had some troubled pasts, and it's nice to see them, working through that, but also,
Yeah, I think that's definitely a major foundational point for Um, I think why that relationship works. I think the shared history, not together, but that troubled youth, kind of being a lost soul, struggling in the early years, not really having a place. I think there are clear connection points between those two people that make it a natural pairing. And I completely agree that it's nice to see Star Trek go the route of that real slow burn that actually pays off. I think in TNG, like you said, with Picard and Crusher, and even with Riker and Troy, until through the series, not the movies where you do get some payoff and beyond with Picard, but in the series, a lot of the Riker Troy stuff is kind of a lot of will they, won't they, are they or aren't they? Is it like a casual thing, or are they anything at all? Or are they friends with that? Like, what are they?
Yeah,
like, there's a lot of just kind of like
there's mystery to it,
mushy middle, mystery to it. There's a lot of questions that don't get answered on that relationship. And then with Picard and Crusher, there's this bubbling. They could, but will they ever? And then in Attached, they kind of confront it and talk about it, but they decide not to. With Day of Honor and with the Tom and B'Elanna thing, you actually get some payoff, and you get it with Kira Noda too later on. But this came first, I think, with the actual payoff and the actual commitment to doing it. And it's nice to see. And the benefit of this also is that we get to see stuff that comes after. Like with Kira Noda, by the time they kind of like culminate and actually do their thing, the show's almost kind of over. You get a little bit of it in season 7, but there's not a lot of air there. Like the show's doing a lot of things at that point. They're juggling a lot of balls in the air at the same time with trying to wrap the show up, and get the war and all these different character arcs to deal with. And Kira Noda is certainly there, and it's a big part of that show. But with Tom and B'Elanna, from this point on, like I said, you have seasons 4, 5, 6, 7 with a lot of airtime dedicated to this dynamic, and it really does, I think, shift the focus of the show a little bit in terms of those two characters. And gives the show a distinctive piece with this relationship. I think it's a major thing that the show leans into a lot. So, really important episode.
Yeah, and it changes those characters, right? I feel like Tom becomes more of a mature kind of set in his ways, whereas before I think it was more like a kind of bachelor, maybe a hothead at times. So, it's cool to see. Not just Tom, too, but these characters make that change.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I definitely... I'm listening to I know you're not listening to it, you're kind of waiting, but Delta Flyers, listening to Robert Duncan McNeil, experience watching the show for the first time in a long time, and not always being entirely happy with the presentation of Tom Paris early on, finding him to be a little too toxic masculinity kind of stuff. Like, I think that he is bothered by it. He finds fault in his own performance. He finds fault in the writing. I'm curious to see his reaction to the character. I think what he probably remembered about the show, this point, Day of Honor and beyond, where the character's much more mature and has big adult things to deal with the relationship with B'Elanna. And so you're right. I think it really does do a lot of good for that character in particular.
And I like that we explore kind of a romance. Like I think we do get some one-off relationships, or just some relationships in passing, but it's nice to be able to have like a main, like a series regular in the main credits, to be able to explore that kind of workplace drama. So
yeah, definitely. And I think in episodes following this, you do get some of that. I think in like Scientific Method, before they kind of like fully come out as a couple, they're kind of juggling. Do we want to make this public? How are we going to do this? So you do get some like cool place relationship kinds of things explored there too, coming off of this episode. There's also the obvious, I'm just looking at the screen grab in the page you have shared. The technical achievement of the episode, I think, really holds up well. The episode leads to Tom and B'Elanna having to go off in a shuttlecraft to retrieve the warp core, I believe, which kind of gets like stolen. They have to eject the core, and it gets picked up by these Katati, which is the article that we landed on, which Gowan gave us this conversation. and they have issues and have to eject out into space in EV suits, and they're floating together, hoping to get rescued, and think they're going to die, and they have to, be together through that experience. And the zero G spacesuit stuff, I think, is remarkably good for 1997 or whatever this was, and I think it's really well achieved. It's I'm always taken with the technical achievement of the episode, and I'm sure it was time consuming and difficult and not the easiest thing to shoot.
Yeah,
I'm impressed by it.
Yeah, it does feel big, right? They're in EV suits, like you said, but also they're ejecting the warp core. That's not a shot that they had. That's not a stock shot. They had to do that, animate that for this week, and so yeah, it does feel big. It does do a lot of things.
Definitely, it really does, and I think that's a successful element for sure here. The ambition of it. I'm sorry.
And I like the idea of, this is kind of stepping away from the kind of the relationship side of this episode, but it's the kind of concept of like trying to barter with people and working with aliens along the way to kind of further advance their kind of position and things like that. And it kind of to me builds off the premise of what you would expect. Like this ship is making its way, and we've got to find alliances and work with other people to get to where we want to go. So in the end, it doesn't go their way, but I think it just makes for kind of an interesting kind of dynamic and things to think about when I think about the kind of other side of the coin of this episode of the working with other aliens along the way.
Yeah, it's kind of a core principle of Voyager's premise, right? Like this ragtag mission that they find themselves on, and having to find help where they can, and like you said, to build alliances, make trades to get this or get that they need to keep going. They're inevitably going to deal with problematic situations and people that are not as willing to help as maybe some others. And I think what Rob mentioned, Rob and Ian are both here as well. We have a nice little crowd in the chat room.
Welcome, actually. Guys.
We have Rob, Ian, Dom, Cyber Honey, Jimmy77 was in there. Rob mentions he likes Seven in this episode and her dealing with what she did as a Borg. And even more broadly than that, I think I like that this forces the crew, Janeway, to kind of reckon with the fact that the Borg have done a lot of damage in this region of space. And when people find out that there is an ex-Borg, like, just kind of hanging on this ship, there may be difficulties that come from that. Like, there's going to be a lot of harbored resentment, a lot of pain, in the air in this region because of what the Borg have done. So there are consequences that are going to come from that. And I think these early season 4 episodes with Seven on the ship, there are a few examples of that, where Seven's presence on Voyager is an added risk for the ship in a situation where they're already kind of at risk because they're alone and very vulnerable. So it does. I think it does good to explore her place on the ship, her duties, what she's going to do, and then what it means for the crew and for the ship itself to have her aboard. Like, what are the consequences of this decision? It's not just a simple, okay, she's here now and off we go, and here she is living here, and like there are things that have to be worked through. And I think this episode does a good job of establishing that those things are happening. On the ship,
which I like, because it's nice that it, like, her joining this crew isn't just right away. She fits right in. No, it's gonna take some time to work through some internal things and some external things, which we didn't get really with the kind of Maquis. So I think that even though that this might be a little bit more isolated, but I really like that they do explore that for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's important that they did that, because I think in Scorpion, and even in The Gift a little bit, this decision was controversial. Like, this is not a no-brainer. This is not an easy thing to do. Like, to keep Seven around and to, like, this is a risky move, and it's not a clean-cut decision. This is it's kind of a bet Janeway's making that
Yeah.
isn't a no-brainer. So I think, sometimes Voyager gets knocked around a little bit for being safe and not serialized and not wanting to explore more long-running things. And I think this is another example of Voyager doing more than people think it does with, picking things up and running with them. It's not always what, a 2020 show would do or what Deep Space Nine would have done or even Enterprise would have done. It doesn't go quite as far as some of those things would have. Yeah. But it's there. I mean, there's plenty, I think, there for, a committed audience and somebody who loves the show and loves Star Trek as a whole to kind of build some headcanon and assume that there are big things happening. And there's enough breadcrumbs there to pick up and run with.
Oh, for sure. And I like that at this point, still the Borg feel dangerous. So bringing on Seven feels dangerous too. So I do like that as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely agree. Rob also mentions that the warp core ejection is so cool. I think this is the first time we actually see that happen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk in The Next Generation and Geordi yelling and Engineer, we're going to have to core in these different situations. Of course, you never have to.
Yeah.
Like, they always find a way away from having to do that. I don't think they ever actually do it. But in this episode, they actually have to do it. And you see it happen. Like, there's a little visual effects shot of the core going out of the ship and getting left behind, and off it goes. That's cool. That's definitely, it feels like a big moment in that era of Trek, because that's such a piece of terminology that gets thrown around a lot.
We
to actually see it, do it, and to see that it's a big deal and it's a pain in the ass. There's a now you have to go get it, and it's a consequential decision. To have to do that.
Yeah,
so I really like that.
It's taking away such an essential piece of that ship that I think it makes for a fun hour to be able to kind of get that back and do what they need to do. But that visual effects draw is so cool.
Definitely.
And it feels, I don't know, it feels like it's cool to see that, because like it adds a sense of realism. Like the it's not just like one little piece. It's a big, like, it's decks and decks tall. So it's so cool. So I
agree. I'm going to put you on the spot. We did an episode way back, like probably in 2018, on our favorite Star Trek romances. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, as you're where you are in your rewatch right now, having everything in your mind, what is this your favorite pairing, Tom and B'Elanna, or is there something else kind of popping in mind as a?
I think this is tough, man. You are putting me on the spot, because there's some stuff in Deep Space Nine that I want to get through and I want to see. I'd like to see the Worf and Dax, but also the Odo and Kira stuff is interesting. I like Cisco and what he works through too. So with Cassidy Yates, but man, that's tough. I think it's probably my favorite. Right now, if I'm talking today, looking back at it, but I think there's some other potentials that, again, there's some other relationships, but weren't really relationships. And is that just, do those even count, because they're kind of more in my head? So
it's tough. It's definitely tough, because there are so many levels of them. I think
this, to me, is the highest level one. I mean, I guess Dax and Worf get married, and that.
Yeah, I think this is the one that usually comes to mind for me most prominently, because of it just feels most complete to me. It feels like we get the slow burn, we get the build up, we get the culmination, we get this. I feel like the moment where it kind of sparks into a real thing feels big and important, and I love what this episode does to put these two characters in a position to have to admit how they feel. I feel like that gives it weight. And then I think the length of time that we have left in the show to explore them being together.
3 seasons.
And that it ends, we go through marriage and we go through dating and marriage and pregnancy, and ends with at the very end of Endgame. There's a real arc there that that starts. I don't even know when it starts, to be honest. Like, I one of the things I kind of always look for when I go into Voyager is like, when do you first start to see like little hints? I feel like it starts maybe at like towards the beginning of season 3, and then of course you get blood fever, which does the fun.
That's what I was thinking. I thought it was blood fever, but I was trying to think like maybe it is.
There might be little things before
that. Yeah.
Maybe little teeny hints prior, but blood fever's the first
That's
time
the
that
big,
I think they acknowledge that this is something that they're playing with.
Yeah.
With like big red lettering, bold, like, hey, this is happening.
Yeah.
But I do think even earlier than that, they start laying groundwork. So I can't even pinpoint like when it becomes maybe a thing, and I feel like that's real. Like that sometimes happens in real life. Like sometimes it's that slow burn thing is real. So I think beginning, middle, and end, the whole picture of it, it's probably my favorite.
Yeah.
And I think this episode's a big part of it, actually. I think Dave Honnor's a major piece of that. Rob mentions that the Katati is kind of a callback to the Vidians for him. We see how desperate people can be when faced with extreme difficulties. The Katati are really ravaged by the Borg, a shell of their former selves, and really beat up. You're right. I think that's a good point. The Vidians, obviously, with the phage and really being up against it with that biological, medical issue. Katati are just kind of hunted and beaten up by the Borg. Destruction of their home world. I'm seeing on the article.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good call, Rob, as per usual from you. Yeah. But cool design too. Like definitely a cool.
Very unique. I don't envy the actors having to sit through the makeup chair to get into that. But yeah, very, very unique.
Yeah, sometimes the Voyager aliens kind of run together for me. Like when we clicked the article and it came up Katati, I was saying that I couldn't like picture. They weren't popping right into my head what a Katati looked like. But now that I see the little screenshot of the actor there, I do. They come immediately to mind, and I can hear. Like, I definitely, and he definitely conveys a lot of that desperation and kind of defeated attitude. That final shot there, I see. The Voyager coming into frame on the reflection of the.
That's so cool.
The headgear is
yeah.
I think Dave Iron's a great episode. I think it's got it all. There was a conversation on Twitter earlier this weekend about like what makes a great Star Trek episode. Like what are the principles? What are the like building blocks? And I responded and said, like big science fiction concept. Like if it can do multiple of these things, it's a masterpiece. Was kind of the question. Like what makes a Star Trek masterpiece? And big science fiction concept. Meaningful character beats and development, world building. Like this episode's got a lot of character. Some cool science fiction with the spacewalk, being stuck out and alone in space together. I think this episode checks a lot of boxes for me, and it's just the technical achievement of it is a major point to that. I can't overlook how impressive the direction, the visual effects work. Camera work
for just a single episode
to make it feel real for a single episode. You might to get that done in the 7 or 8 days they take to shoot these things. I think that this is an episode where the technical achievement of it carries a lot of weight.
Yeah, because if you think about it, they're doing this for just a single episode. You might expect something like this from a 2-parter or season premiere, season finale, like something like that. But it's the 3rd episode of the season, so
yeah. Agreed. Totally agree. Dom mentions that looking at the Katati on Memory Alpha, one of them was in Deep Space Nine, so obviously the prosthetics were designed for Deep Space Nine. I'm imagining Dom maybe one of those background species walking around the promenade. At some point, there's so many crazy alien designs that you just see kind of walking around Deep Space Nine.
They came over
pulled it out for this, which
Voyager.
Classic Star Trek use of reusing designs and resources. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Day of Honor?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we can talk about that last scene. I really like that. I feel like I think it conveys the emptiness, the grandness, but also being able to find each other in this this really big, far out like world. So I do really like that. And then the reflection, I forgot about that until I just saw that down here at the end in the final act. But this shot here is so cool. When they're
really
both
cool
kind of
stuff.
passing out, and you can see Voyager rolling up on them. That's so cool.
Yeah, definitely agree. I guess the other thing that we haven't really touched on is where the title of the episode comes from. Is B'Elanna is kind of one of the several points along the way that she's kind of dealing with the Klingon tradition. You know, B'Elanna has a lot of struggles with her identity, and how much she embraces the Klingon half of herself as opposed to the human half of herself. It's a kind of classic Star Trek kind of dilemma for a character, like how much that identity battle. I always appreciated that about B'Elanna, that internal struggle, because I think that's such a calling card for Star Trek, such a foundation, again, thing that Star Trek characters tend to play with.
Yeah.
And this is another example of that, where she doesn't quite feel comfortable embracing that Klingon side, and this episode's kind of all about building toward finding that comfort zone and deciding what she values in herself, and what traditions mean something to her, and what's the point of it all. Really good stuff. Yeah,
some good writing.
Yeah.
I want to watch Voyager.
Agreed. Yeah, now I want to watch Dave on
Yeah.
at this point, for sure. I can't wait to get to Voyager in my rewatch. That's definitely a takeaway here. But it's a reminder that once Voyager gets to this point, especially that fourth and fifth season, I think Voyager really does fine.
It's a high point for sure.
Cylinders and really peaks right around this point. Some conversation in the chat about some of the book announcements that came out this past week. There's a lot of new Star Trek. Ian was asking anybody else excited about the new books announced this week. There are some. I think you kind of pinpoint. I think a lot of people were kind of remember back in Discovery season 3 early on that year gap. You kind of, I think, at one point maybe when we were talking about People of Earth, when we jump ahead of the year, we get them back together, and you're like, I kind of want to see what happened in that year. It sounds like a book. It's a book. It's coming out today. Wonderlands. It's called Exploring Burnham's Year Alone. The book. So that's on the way. There's a Rios backstory not coming for Picard, his time in Starfleet. And there's a trilogy of novels that was also announced, discussed on Twitter. Take place in the 24th century.
Yeah.
So a lot of big book news this week out there.
Yeah, which is that's a staple of Trek. If there's been a gap, between TOS and TNG, a lot of the times the only thing holding it together was the novel universe, so the literary universe. So
literary universe does a great job of, I think, exploring those gaps and filling out points along the timeline.
I know Bill and I aren't the best. We're not as knowledgeable as most people, but we do have a great resource on the Discord server. We do have a literature channel, so if you want to come discuss more literary stuff, definitely come over to the Discord server.
And our Discord server is populated with some of the folks in the room here. Dom and Rob and Ian are all a part of that. And, so if you're watching this and you would like, if you're a Star Trek novel reader and you want people to talk to about it, our Discord server is a good place to be, because there are folks in there that are very much on top of these novels and read them and are eager to discuss them. Rob has run a Star Trek book club for quite some time. You can find that on Twitter as well. A lot of successful conversations been had there. So great places to go for that Star Trek literary conversation. But back to the Discord server, if you're interested in joining for all these things we talked about, the Trek After Dark stuff we kind of let off with how we use the random article generator, and talking about books and what you're watching. All these things are happening on the Trek Live Discord server. You can DM me at TrekFan4387, and I'll be happy to get you an invitation if you would like to join the party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that kind of wraps it up. I will, after this gets posted, if you're watching this after the fact or listening after the fact, we thank you very much. I'll put the articles down in the description on YouTube, and then I'll see if I can do that on the podcast feed as well, so you guys can see the progression of, okay, this is the article that came up
that we read,
and then we got into Day of Honor. So, yeah, that'd be a good resource for you guys.
So I think we were talking the last night off air about luck, and that's a whole different conversation. But in this case, I'm going to actually stand by the idea that luck exists, and we got lucky with the random article generator and got a cool hit, and gave us an easy conversation to have and a fun conversation. So that's always a risky move to do the no prep and random article generator and lean into that. And I think we're 3 for 3 as far as kind of landing on something that was an easy jumping off point to have a cool conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do every time we do this topic, I always tell myself we should do this more. So if you guys want to see us do this more, definitely subscribe or let us know to all our social media platforms and things like that, because as much as I do like the no prep, it also, I get to learn things about the episode, about things about Trek that I didn't really know. And so anytime I get to learn about an obscure, vessel in an episode that I really do like, then it's always a good time.
Yeah, agreed. I think there's definitely room to continue to keep doing these and make it a part of our kind of rotation. Mm-hmm. Up until now, we've kind of talked about doing it maybe twice a year, but I'm certainly open to more often than that.
With that being said, we will be off next week. There will be no Trek Lab episode next week, but the following week, in 2 weeks, we'll be back with some more Star Trek content. So stay tuned.
Look forward to that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Be safe. Talk to you soon.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.